The BFG, Chapter 22, Feeding Time. While the giants were being captured, a tremendous bustle and hustle was going on back home in England. Every earth digger and mechanical contrivance in the country had been mobilized to dig the colossal hole in which the 9 giants were to be permanently imprisoned. 10,000 men and 10,000 machines worked carelessly through the night under powerful arc lights and massive task, which was completed only just in time. The hole itself was about twice the size of a football field and 500 feet deep. The walls were perpendicular, and engineers had calculated that there was no way a giant could escape once he was put in, even if all 9 giants were to stand on each other's shoulders. The topmost giant would still be some 50 feet from the top of the hole. The 9 giants carrying helicopters hovered over the massive pit. The giants, one by one, were lowered to the floor, but they were still trussed up, and now came the tricky business of releasing them from their bonds. Nobody wanted to go down to do this, because the moment a giant was freed, he would be sure to turn the wretched person who had freed him and gobble him up. As usual, the BFG had the answer. "I has told you before," he said. "Giants is never eating giants. So I is going down, and I shall untie them myself before you can say Rack Jobinson." With thousands of fascinated spectators, including the Queen, peering down into the pit, the BFG was lowered on a rope. One by one he released the giants, and they stood up, stretched their stiffened limbs, and started leaping about in a fury. "Why is they putting us down here in this grub-sledging hole?" they shouted at the BFG. "Because you is guzzling human beings," the BFG answered. "I is always warning you not to do it, and you is never taking the teenchiest bit of notice." "In that case," the flesh lump eater bellowed, "I think we is guzzling you instead." The BFG grabbed the dangling rope and was hoisted out of the pit just in time. The great bulging sack he had brought back with him from giant country lay on top of the pit. "What's in there?" the Queen asked him. The BFG put an arm in the sack and pulled out a gigantic black and white striped object the size of a man. "Snozzcumber," he cried. "This is the repulsant Snozzcumber, Magister, and this is all we is going to give these disgustive giants from now on." "May I taste it?" the Queen asked. "Don't, Magister, don't," cried the BFG. "It is tasting of trog filth and pig squiggle." With that, he tossed the Snozzcumber down to the giants below. "There's your supper," he shouted. "Have a munch on that." He fished out more Snozzcumbers from the sack and threw them down the giant's bellow. Down, the giants hollowed and cursed. The BFG laughed. "It serves them right, left and center," he said. "What will we feed them on when the Snozzcumbers are all used up?" the Queen asked him. "They is never being used up, Magister," the BFG answered, smiling. "I is always bringing in the sack a whole bungle of Snozzcumber plants, which I is giving, with your permission, to the royal gardener to put in the soil. Then we is having an everlasting supply of this resplendent food to feed these bloody giants on." "What a clever fellow you are," the Queen said. "You are not too very well educated, but you are really nobody's fool. I can see that."